Welcome to the Quinlan School of Business and this program on the future of business education, which is part of a signature series here at the Quinlan School. I'm John Pellicero. I have the privilege of serving as Provost and Chief Academic Officer for the university. And on behalf of Dr. Joanne Rooney, our President, I want to extend a warm welcome to all of you and again to the university and the Quinlan School. I'm grateful for your interest in this annual series, which periodically brings together experts from the academy and industry for an examination of the future of business education, its continued relevance and success in the 21st century environment. This evening's program will be specifically to consider the impact of external certification programs on business education. The role that schools of business can or should play in preparing graduates to secure meaningful employment, assume positions of responsibility and leadership, demonstrate accountability, and contribute to a greater social good is a perennial issue of concern for the community of scholars situated within schools of business. Indeed, the same can be said regarding the role of higher education generally and its continued relevance and capacity to prepare students to enter the workforce, as well as prepare them for their responsibilities of citizenship. At Loyola, we graduate students whose professional goals are not only business-oriented, hoping to become accountants, auditors, financial analysts, and managers, but also include a range of disciplines and professions, hoping to become physicians, lawyers, K-12 teachers, social workers, psychologists, engineers, even forensic scientists. As the Chief Academic Officer of a university that has numerous professional programs, I know all too well the responsibility, the real responsibility, that Loyola has to prepare all graduates of these programs to launch their professional careers. Nascent careers frequently begin outside the university with external assessments of discipline-specific knowledge, practical skills, and professional conduct, sometimes before the ink on their diplomas has yet to dry. So for this reason, any discussion that contributes to a better understanding of how a university faculty and administrators can improve upon our responsibility to our students in this regard is certainly an important discussion, and that's what I know we will hear tonight. So we at Loyola are pleased to host this program and are especially grateful for the participation of this evening's distinguished panelists, to whom you'll be formally introduced shortly. I'm honored that they've joined us this evening and appreciate enormously their perspectives and insights, and I commend their commitment to quality improvement in business education specifically and higher education more generally. I also want to thank Dr. Kevin Stevens, the Dean of the Quinlan School of Business and a Professor of Accounting, for his support of this current initiative. The roles and responsibilities of a business school dean are certainly numerous, demanding, and under increasingly close scrutiny by a public that includes parents, students, alumni, donors, trustees, corporate leaders, accreditors, and government agencies. So I know the challenges that a dean faces, and I want to thank Kevin again for joining us 2 years ago as the new dean of the Quinlan School. And I also want to thank Dr. Abel Jallavand, who is former dean, professor of finance, and the Ralph Marotta Chair in Free Enterprise, for organizing this evening's event and moderating the panel. Thank you, Abel, for your continued commitment to your profession, to the Quinlan School, and to Loyola. And I'm also pleased to see so many of our faculty here this evening, along with others who've joined us from area businesses and maybe colleges and universities as well. You no doubt will be participating in a stimulating and insightful dialogue that will take place. As you know well, this event is intended to serve as a public forum for a thoughtful discussion of the future of business education, coupled as it is to the changing landscape of higher ed. This event is also another in a continuing series that is put on by the Quinlan School throughout the academic year. In the past, the Quinlan School has led the way in featuring timely and thoughtful programs on such topics as business ethics, the financial crisis, corporate boards, bubbles, public policy, credit derivatives, managing risk in the global supply chain, and the risks and rewards of financial innovation. So this whole series on the future of business education, including tonight's program on lessons from external certification programs, continues to examine timely topics for our school and our businesses. Thank you for attending, and let me now turn the program over to Abel. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I always appreciate, I know you are extremely busy, and the fact that you're giving your time to this program and the Quinlan School of Business is greatly appreciated by me and our faculty and our students. Thanks again. Welcome to our new building. I have been there, and every time that somebody comes in, it says that what a beautiful building. Well, we have worked very hard for it, and we are proud to have the Schreibers building to facilitate our students' education and the collective academic activities that we do. We have a very interesting program for you tonight, and I think John said it very well, the objective of this series, and particularly tonight's event. As he mentioned, and I firmly believe, the primary responsibility of a professional school is to basically train employable students that they can think effectively, responsibly, and move our corporations and our organizations forward so that the economy goes forward, the society and communities can benefit. Historically, and that is not something that we have discovered today, historically business schools have been a bit challenged in terms of achieving that objective when you compare them with their sister professional schools such as law schools and medical schools. And this is not because of lack of effort. This is precisely because of the makeup of law schools and medical schools versus business schools. In law schools and medical schools, most of the professors, they basically teach what they practice. And it makes a huge difference. In business schools, on the other hand, that's not the reality. And if you look at some averages, you know, basically in the United States, I think in Europe these averages are quite different, but probably less than 10% of faculty members in business schools, they are actively consulting. In fact, consulting in business schools is not encouraged. And this is something that perhaps, you know, just that we need to look at it in a different eye and see that how we could use that as a vehicle to help business schools to achieve their professional obligations in a better way. At Quinlan, we have discussed this issue, and we are aware of its importance, and we have taken some steps to alleviate that gap, to address that gap. And one shining example is really the Quinlan's Finance Group. In 2016, the Quinlan Finance Department signed academic articulation agreement with the Chartered Financial Analysts Institute, CFA, and the CAIA, which is the Chartered Alternative Investment Analyst Association. And what that means, this articulation agreement, is not just an agreement which is signed. These two organizations, which are basically global, and as you will hear tonight, they are in over 100 countries around the world. They basically looked at the finance curriculum and they accredited this curriculum as delivering the same academic goals and learning goals that these institutions need in their national certification examinations. So that means our students are getting the knowledge which is required and necessary in order to pass level 1 to level 3 at the CFA exam and other exams at the CAIA examination. It's interesting, from the time that we introduced that concept, we have over 20 of our students that they have already signed up for level 1 CFA and also for the CAIA, divided 10 at the undergraduate and 10 at our Master of Science in Finance program. So this is one way that we could really try to close this gap, and we have a signing ceremony tonight that I will, that it will come very shortly. So what we're going to do tonight is that we are having the leaders of two very global organizations plus a faculty member who has had significant connection and significant impact on the Certified Public Accounting Associations, that they're going to address three basic questions for us. The first question is that, should business education be delivered more aligned with the practice of management? Because that's clearly not the case. And if it was, we wouldn't be here. The second issue is that, are business schools faculty members losing their legitimacy in the business world within which their students intend to work? Because if that connection is not there, then there are some questions, and I think that we are publicly being asked for that question. And the third issue is that, what are some solutions? How can we address this gap? So to address these issues, to my immediate right, I'm delighted to introduce Peter McKay, who is head of the examination development at the CFA Institute. The CFA is the most recognized global institution in investment management and credentialing. It presently has over 142,000 members in 159 countries. It is astounding to note that in June 1963, only 284 candidates sat for the first CFA exam, and in 2016, over 172,000 candidates sat for the June exam. In many circles in the business community, having a CFA is as important as having an MBA. So I think it is crucial for us and for business schools to try to cultivate any interaction between these two organizations, because they're looking at different aspects of business decision making, and I think we have things to offer to each other to alleviate that gap. Peter is an active contributor to credentialing and testing industry. He has held leadership roles at Office of District of Columbia Pension and Office of Investment for the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board. Next to Peter, right after third, actually, microphone, you have Bill Kelly. Bill is the CEO of the Chartered Alternative Investment Analysts Association, or CAIA, which is a global authority in alternative investment education and credentialing with more than 8,700 members in over 90 countries. Bill has over 30 years of experience in asset management industry with extensive managerial and boardroom experience. He has led both startups and full-scale global organizations. He has served as the CEO of Robeco Investment Management, founder and former CEO of Boston Partners Asset Management, and CFO of the Boston Company Asset Management. Next to Bill, Bell Needle Jr. is the EY Distinguished Professor of Accounting at DePaul University, and we always welcome them here. He is an internationally recognized expert in financial reporting and auditing. His research work has appeared in leading academic and professional journals, and he has published several best-selling textbooks. Bell's scope of professional experience in the certified public accounting area is astounding. He's a member of the consultative group on international financial reporting standards to the United Nations. He has been Vice President Education of the American Accounting Association. He is the past president of the International Association for Accounting Education and Research. He is elected U.S. representative to the European Accounting Association and president of the Federation of Schools of Accountancy. He is the recipient of the Illinois CPA Society Outstanding Educator Award and its Lifetime Achievement Award. He is also Outstanding International Accounting Educator by the American Accounting Association, and there are more. So I just decided to stop at this point. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a welcome to our panel. As I mentioned, we have a signing ceremony before we start. I would like to ask our Dean, Kevin Stevens, to come here, and also the director of the MSF program, Tom Noel. Peter?
I have one more accolade to give Bell. Bell Needles hired me as an instructor in 1983, so he was my first boss. Thanks, Bell.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to your thoughts on our discussion tonight. This preliminary event was kind of a bonus, an opportunity to recognize our relationship with the Quinlan School, which I really appreciate. We've had this relationship for just over a year, although some of the activities we've been involved with Quinlan go back about 4 years. And the research challenges is something I'll speak about a little bit later, is something Quinlan has been involved in with us and the local CFA Society of Chicago. So I think, just to echo the comments you've already heard, we're all in this business together. We're trying to produce ethical and competent professionals for the next generation. And we think it's critical at CFA Institute to partner with universities like Loyola and the Quinlan School to try to achieve these ends. Everything we do is really attributable to our collaboration with other entities, investors, employers, and universities. So we're very happy to have this relationship with Quinlan, and we look forward to a long and continuing relationship with you. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
I have no paper.
No paper. Okay. No paper. I'd like to invite Bill Kelly.
Thank you, Abel. Peter, it's a delight to share the stage with the CFA. This is our third academic partnership in Chicago and our 50th globally, and I probably have done 15 to 20 of them in the 3 years I've been at CAIA, but this is the very first time we shared the stage in a joint ceremony with the CFA, so that's a first for us, and it's very exciting. We heard a little bit about the roots of the CFA. We're the newer kid on the block and a little bit of the little engine that could. And there's reasons for that. If you look at the origin of alternative investments getting organized in institutional portfolios, they really only date back 15 to 20 years. So if you look at the global assets under management, depending on how you count them, there's about 100 trillion in total assets. Alternatives is about 7 or 8 trillion. So it's still a very small part of the puzzle, but I think what the world needs to be thinking about is a multi-asset approach to asset allocation and getting uncorrelated betas in a portfolio. And if I look at our relationship with the CFA, 40% of my CAIA members are also CFAs, so it just shows the cohesion of these two organizations and how nicely they fit together. The last point from my side is that if I look at the average age and tenure of the person taking our exam, typically it's 7 to 10 years into their work experience. And with CAIA, it's usually been a second degree. But what we're seeing now is more and more as students come out of university and thinking about a career in private equity, as an example, we're starting to see this as an entry-level credential, and we could not possibly do that without these kinds of partnerships. So very pleased to add number 50 and very excited to be here tonight. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we can begin now. I will ask Peter McKay to give us his presentation.
Thank you, Abel. I should have mentioned that our relationship with Quinlan is our only relationship with a university in Chicago. So we might get a few more in the future, but you're the first. I mentioned how much we like to collaborate. I should confess that we have not collaborated on these presentations tonight, so hopefully we won't be too clashy. Thank you, Abel. So I'm going to talk a lot about CFA Institute and the CFA program. I'm not really trying to sell it, and I'm not trying to brag about it. It's just that when I thought about what I was able to contribute to this discussion tonight, almost all of it was related to my experience with the CFA program. So I hope you'll forgive me for that. And always a name dropper, we always like to drop Ben Graham's name. We have been around for 55 years, working on developing educational materials and assessments. And you could see it was roughly 20 years in gestation before we actually gave our first test. And the object from the beginning, and continues today, was to create a profession that had standards of competency in the skill areas, but also very strong emphasis on ethical behaviors among investment professionals. That was the basis from the beginning of the credential and the CFA charter. Strong professional capabilities and ethical behavior. So there are 4 things you have to do to get your CFA charter. You have to pass the 3 levels of the exam. You have to have professional references. You have to adhere and promise to adhere to our code of conduct. And you have to have 4 years of relevant work experience. And I hope you'll forgive another fetish I have. I don't like to do too many bullet charts in a row, so I try to find pictures I can insert. Don't think too hard about what the connection is. It just amuses me. So we are, very importantly, this will come through in several points I'd like to make. We're a self-study distance learning program. So we produce curriculum, we distribute it. Last year we had 250,000 registrations in our 3 levels. Not all of those sat for the exam, but and then we assessed almost 200,000 last year. Our global evolution was somewhat accidental and lucky. We started out just in the U.S. and Canada. In the 60s, we got some inquiries from businesses in Europe and from a regulator in Asia who heard about our program and wanted to introduce something with similar objectives, as I mentioned earlier, in their countries. And so that was kind of the seed for our global growth, and now we're just everywhere. Our greatest growth is China and India. The program tries to follow a cognitive progression. We call it the Bloom's taxonomy. Level 1 focuses mostly on knowledge. Level 2, much more on analysis and application to problems. And Level 3 tries to bring it all together in a portfolio management context. Just mentioned average age was about 27 a few years ago. Now it's, it was 29, now it's about 27 and declining, and I think that's in large part to our relationship with universities like Loyola, where students are learning about the program earlier, they're starting to study our curriculum earlier, and entering the program earlier. So it's a great way to affect the industry, I think, in a very strong way by getting younger people introduced earlier to the ethical components and the competency components. And I should mention, and back to my first point, most of our candidates report that they do use prep services. And so I think there's a value there for universities and for whether you do online interactive learning or in-person classroom learning, you can do a lot more things than we can do at CFA Institute by just producing and delivering a curriculum. So I'll talk about some of those advantages later. The whole heart of our program is practice analysis. That's how it started. We go out, we used to do this every 5 years or so in an intensive way. Now we're doing it all the time, every year. We go out and we talk to professionals, our membership, which is, as Abul said, about 140,000 now. We talk to employers very directly. We talk to university professors, and we talk to regulators about what they're seeing and what they would like to see for people coming into the profession as new entrants. That basically has driven our curriculum from the beginning, and it continues to do so. We, about 12 years ago, decided that we were going to start to develop and own our own curriculum. We did that for a few reasons. First, we were finding that a lot of our textbooks and a lot of the other readings that we introduced to the curriculum didn't deliver the body of knowledge that was identified in the practice analysis program we conducted. There were what we called gaps and overlaps. So we found that going out and getting the external readings was a very inefficient way to deliver the body of knowledge we had spent all this money and effort learning what the industry wanted. So we started gradually to develop our own readings. Another factor was cost. Royalties are very expensive. It's much cheaper to develop your own materials, and we just thought we could do a better job of it. So one thing that we find very important, and I'll say some more about this, we, on almost every reading, we commission a practitioner and a professor to collaborate on that reading. And we find that it delivers theoretical rigor as well as practical application. This is just a brief outline of what the program looks like. I just want to mention that ethics is at the heart of it and has been from the beginning. Level 1, you could see, focuses mostly on tools of the trade, quant, economics, accounting. Level 2 gets into the analysis and valuation of all the different asset classes. And Level 3 brings it together in a portfolio management wealth context. This is my construct. I don't think it's all that original, but I just want to say it's not CFA Institute's. I just invented it. It's how I think about things. So back to the theory and practice. We view the CFA program as a melding of theory and practice. I don't think it would have any value without the theoretical rigor. The concepts and the principles that have proven their worth in many different kinds of applications. That's what we try to teach. It also has to be done pedagogically, rigorously. It has to be written to teach. One of the things that we, again, found was detrimental in our earlier programs. We put out a lot of research reports and journal articles, and although those were very interesting and relevant topics, they really weren't designed to teach a student or a candidate how to do those things and how to apply those concepts in multiple settings. So that's what we try to do, is meld those two circles on the left, theory and practice, and that's what we think our value is. Organizational success is often due to what people call soft skills. I'm going to jump to the next slide and jump back. People don't always agree on what is included in this soft skills label. These are some of the things we talk about: adaptability, emotional awareness, flexibility, resilience. And I think those are very important skills that, again, in a university setting, you can help students develop these attributes. We can't do anything about this. And really, I think this is where a lot of people stumble in their careers. I have had the good fortune, I have a really strong team. We've had the good fortune of attracting really good people. In my 12 years, there have only been 5 people that we've had to let go in adverse circumstances. And 4 of the 5 were because of these reasons. They couldn't play nice with others. They couldn't respect others. Only 1 we let go for competence reasons. So this is a critical area where I think universities and any kind of personal training, face-to-face relationships can build. Again, back to the soft skills. A lot of people, I consider these 2 boxes at the bottom to be absolutely critical to any profession, and I don't consider them personally soft skills, although some people label them as such. Communications is critically important to success today, and all 3 of those, in my view, are critically important. Learning how to listen to other people and respect them, learning how to write and express your thoughts, and learning how to speak your thoughts. And again, these are things that you in the university setting can really do a great job helping students develop. We can't do a thing about those. And finally, in the bottom box on the right, integrity, ethical behavior. I don't consider that a competency. We have 10 domains or 10 topics in our program, and ethics is one of them. I think the other 9 are competencies that we can teach, skills we can teach. I think ethics is something where you teach the rules, but you can't, and you give examples of good behavior, but you can't really tested in a way that I'd like. That topic always tests a little bit differently than the other 9. Anyway, that's my picture of the perfect professional. So you at the university can do a lot to produce that person. So I'd like to move, and just a couple more slides. What is, people can ask, well, what's new today? What's any different? So I went to school in hippie days in the late 60s and early 70s. And even then, I will tell you, we sort of knew when we got out we were going to have to get a job. So in that sense, nothing has changed. But in my view, a lot has changed. The pace of change, I think, has undeniably become much, much more rapid today. And it's a challenge for people coming into the industry. I recently finished a book, Thank You for Being Late, by Thomas Friedman, and he refers to these phenomena as accelerations. And he's talking about technology, globalization, climate change, and he relates how they are all affecting the workplace today. Technology in particular, I read a couple of other books, storage capacity, processing power, social media, artificial intelligence, the cloud. These are all very strong influences going out in the future for our young people. A couple of other books I'd recommend on technology, Rise of the Robots by Martin Ford, and The Inevitable, 12 Technological Forces Shaping Our Future by Kevin Kelly. I gave my son-in-law the book Rise of the Robots because I read in there some discussion of how artificial intelligence, machine learning was starting to affect radiology, the practice of radiology. And my son-in-law is a medical physicist, so a lot of similarities to the radiology profession. So about a month after I gave it to him, I asked him how it was, and he said it made him afraid, and he asked me not to give him any more books. So be careful. But just recently I read about the accounting profession and the legal profession applications of machine learning, where a lot of the work that used to be the grunt work of new entrants to the business is being done by machines. A lot of the data collection and initial analysis, identifying anomalies, things like that. So it all leads to, I think, expectations on a more prepared higher level candidate coming in. Competition, again, something you could say hasn't changed at all. We've always been in a competitive world. I do think, though, back in my day, employers expected to take their time training you for a year or two. Now, I think for the most part, they expect you to come in on day one and be able to perform. I even had a quick quote. Am I running late? Do I?
You still have
Just a couple minutes. I wanted to read a quotation. The AICPA, the people who produce the CPA exams, and you might hear more about that from one of our speakers, I admire some of the innovative things they're doing. They're introducing more task-based simulations into their exams. And a quote from one of their leaders I found very interesting. He said, "The motivation was to avoid the situation where a candidate could memorize an entire book, do really well on the exam, and not do so well when they showed up on the first day of work." So that's something I think we can all contribute to make sure it doesn't happen. Last slide, and again, excuse the picture. So my basic theme is I think we're all in this together. Bill and I and other credential owners are all trying to achieve the same thing. Universities are as well, and employers are all looking for the same thing. We want to develop competent and ethical new entrants into the business. We and universities, credentials and universities, I think, also share the goal of wanting employers to see the people that we turn out as being valuable to them. If they're not, I think we're toast. I mean, the only way we can sustain ourselves is if employers continue to recognize the value of the CFA charter and the value of of an MBA from Quinlan or wherever. So just a couple of points and I'll close. How do we achieve these goals? I think there are a number of ways. And again, I won't keep repeating this, but I think universities are extremely well positioned to develop the entire gamut of skills that I see there. The teaching the theory, teaching how to apply it, and teaching people how to work well with others in employer settings. Many ways you can partner. We have a strong local society, CFA Society of Chicago. That's about one of 140 societies we have globally. They are active, as I think our membership is very similar to your alumni. They want to do whatever they can do to protect and enhance the value of their degrees, of their charters, and they're also happy to give back. People help them, and they're happy to help the next generation. So all you have to do is ask. The kind of things you can do, I think anywhere from bringing in a local successful practitioner to talk about a day in the life or how his or her journey led to their success. On the other side of the spectrum, internships, long-term cooperative arrangements. My daughter went to Drexel University and studied chemical engineering. It's a 5-year program. Three 6-month periods in that 5 years was spent just working full-time for Johnson & Johnson or Merck. And she learned so much about what she didn't want to do in those jobs, it was invaluable. So any kind of experiences, I know you can't just throw 6 months like that into a 1 or 2 year program, but any kind of collaborations with industry I think are extremely valuable. And just one last anecdote before I give up the floor. In terms of a day in the life or people talking about their journey, last Sunday, I live in a town with the University of Virginia. Last Sunday, we attended a lecture by Bryan Cranston, the actor, and it was just a fascinating guy, his story. But anyway, he mentioned on the Friday before this presentation, he spent the day going around to UVA's drama classes and just talking to them about his career, talking to them about what worked and didn't work for him, and encouraging them to apply the lessons he's learned. So I think it's a really valuable thing to do is collaborate with others, employers and other members of your community. Thank you.
Very much. Of course, does that work? Of course, I'm sure everybody realizes who Bryan Cranston is. Those of you who have watched Breaking Bad, so that's what it is. Yeah?
So, Abel, I may need some help with the slides here. I've got a blank screen. Should I do 20, 25?
25, you can.
I'll do 20.
Hope I didn't break it.
We won't charge you.
Just let the minute show it was a CFA, not Kaya.
This is the future. Is that what it is? Yeah. This
That's
is,
it, yep.
okay.
And I scroll forward.
Yes, but that's right.
This is.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Let me just take you to there. Okay.
Thank
Good.
you.
No problem.
Thanks, Abel. I should maybe start with a bit of a confession. Is sitting on this panel with some learned colleagues. So I am a lapsed CPA, having worked for Price Waterhouse early in my career, and I'm a level 2 CFA candidate, having taken level 1 of the CFA probably 1991, but I'm not a Kaya charter holder. So do as I say, not as I do. But I'm delighted to be here, and maybe just a couple of opening remarks, and I think you're going to see that my presentation is an alternative asset class relative to the CFA, which is supposed to be that way, but I think some of the themes that Peter hit on, I'm going to touch on as well. So I very much believe we're living in very interesting times in this world, and the pace of change is enormous. But is it the pace that is enormous, or is it relative to what we think is the pace itself? And an interesting stat: back in 1900, the turn of the last century, 41% of the jobs in the U.S. were in the agricultural space. I don't know any farmers personally myself, and I think less than 2% of the working world is in that space now. So I think that we go through cycles and seasons, and I think clearly the pace here seems to be enormous. And you talk about automation as a job changer or a job killer, and I very much feel it is the former, not the latter, and we have to adapt to that change. I looked in the Wall Street Journal on the flight from Boston to Chicago today, and Elon Musk is back for a third bite at the apple with Tesla and SpaceX. He's now launching a company called Neuralink, and the goal of this company is to implant electrodes in the brain, and it's theoretically to upload and download reasoning, which is just an unbelievable prospect to think about. I think initially maybe to think about epilepsy, but ultimately to upload and download a thought process. So maybe these chips will take care of the innovation for us. But there is a quote from Musk that I've used quite often. I used it at a conference when I was in California last week. He had an earnings call for Tesla just about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it was a benign quote, but it really stuck with me, which he said, "The factory itself is going to be a more important product than the car." And I think that has a lot of applications, certainly to the industry that I'm in alternatives, and I think the industry that you folks find yourself. And I think the factory is the academic institution. And I think that factory has to constantly retool itself. And you look at a guy like Musk and the success he has, it's not the Tesla, it's the factory that produces the Tesla. And I think there's a lot to be taken away from that one thought. So ultimately, I think we have to embrace this change, and I think if we do, it can be very, very exciting. So let me just walk you through a couple of charts that are probably more practical and maybe come off on some of Abel's thoughts. And I think this is a very appropriate way to start. And I would title this by "Don't Let This Be You." And I think if you're not prepared coming out of an academic setting, I think there are a lot of students like this, that they're the lost population, that they get a degree from a very prestigious university, but they find themselves 4 years later in tremendous debt and pretty much unemployed. And that's a horrible proposition, especially as a father of 5 who's paid a lot of tuition bills. I don't like this chart myself. But there are a couple of perspectives to put this in. So 16% of people surveyed by Pew feel that college has prepared them only very well for the real world. And when I was walking down here, I walked by the Bentley dealership right down the corner, and the entry sticker price for Bentley in there is probably somewhere around $200,000, the same cost as a 4-year degree. And if you went and bought that Bentley and the salesperson told you that it only worked very well 16% of the time, I don't think you would have been a buyer. So I think you are consumers of a product, or your parents are consumers of a product, and ultimately it's you, because even if your parents pay the bill, you're the one with the 40-year career ahead of you, and I think you really have got to be thinking along those lines. There's a software firm in India called HCL, and they had hired a lot of engineers over the years, and they deemed the engineers as trained in India to be unemployable. So now they're getting high school students and they're training them themselves and paying them the same rate ultimately that these engineers would have made. Again, a frightening development if you're in the old world. And then with Bell sitting to my right, he'll be able to relate to this being an EY chair. The EY office in London, so a very serious accounting firm, does not require a college degree anymore as an entry-level credential coming into EY. Now, what that means vis-a-vis the CPA program, I have no idea, but they made great hay out of that, and that just came out last week. And then 2016 in a survey, over half of the MBA programs are showing less than growth than they had in prior years. So it's really a bit of a downdraft in terms of some of these programs out there. And that's why I think if I look at what Quinlan has done with some of these specialized programs, training students for the real world, it is very, very important. Here's just another view of some of these stats and the preparation necessary, and this is what Americans think. And ultimately, it's a shared responsibility. And ultimately, I think all of you are taking on the biggest responsibility. We're saying 72% of you are saying the responsibility is on the shoulders of the individual. About half are saying the university, and about half are saying it's the employer, which I think is a tremendous partnership, because if this is going to work, it's got to be the outside business partners, it's got to be the university itself, and the students have to be invested in this process as well. I was very pleased to see the government having gotten low marks on this, because if we're waiting for the government to figure this out, I would say good luck. So I think that does underscore it. And as I go around the world, we just launched a chapter in Seattle last week. Microsoft has a VC venture. They're funding off their balance sheet, overseen by the CFO, and their biggest issue is having trained people to run these VC companies that they're creating. So the jobs are out there, and the graduates are out there. I think we're experiencing a bit of a mismatch. Here's these word clouds, and this is as described by the millennials versus the non-millennials. And I just want to turn your attention to the right side of that chart, the non-millennials, for a second. And these are horrible big words that I see in there describing this generation before you: lazy, entitled, and spoiled. So I would say thank yourselves that you're not with that bunch of slackers. But the millennials, it's interesting how they describe themselves. And if I look at most of those big words in there, I think these are very good ways that you folks are looking at yourselves. But there are a couple of smaller words on there that I didn't like the fact that they were so small. And the ones that struck me were motivated, driven, and confident. And I think these are very, very important skills. And as you have various leaders throughout industry and senior business people coming through your program, I think you can ask any one of them, were they motivated, driven, and confident? And I would be shocked if none of them said absolutely. And they would be big bubble words for those people as well. So I think that this generation probably does suffer from that a little bit, but they're labels. And I would reject the labels and find a path for yourself. And I hear this work-life balance is very important to the millennial generation as well. And again, 4 of my 5 kids fall into that cohort, so I can very much relate to it. But work-life balance is something you earn over long periods of time. If you want to have that in your 20s, you're not going to have it in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. So I worked very hard, as I'm sure a lot of people throughout this room have. And you do that early in your career, so it gives you more choices and options as you get older. Peter alluded to this a moment ago. I think one of the benefits of the situation we're in as educators, you get a lot of smart people that want to share the stage with an academic or professional credential. And I was down in the Cayman Islands, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was the keynote speaker at an alternatives conference, believe it or not. And I was expecting not a lot, but he is a very talented individual, has basically repotted himself over the course of 3 careers. And one of the things he said is he knew Muhammad Ali very well. And there's a quote from Muhammad Ali that said, how many sit-ups do you do when you're training? And he said, I don't know. I only start counting when it hurts. And it just really underscores the ethical component of hard work is going to be such an important part of what you folks have got to be thinking about as professionals moving into this industry. I couldn't resist, and I'll have to explain this slide to you. So that is a younger version of me with the red hair and the red T-shirt. And for any of you that have been inside of a country club, T-shirts are not allowed. So this was on a municipal tennis court, and I grew up as a solid middle-class person. But my dad's philosophy for college, for the most part, would play true today. And he had some very simple rules. It had to be Catholic, because he was a devout practicing Catholic, which he is today. It had to be commuter distance away, so he felt he had his own bedrooms in the house, and he's not going to pay for room and board at somebody else's college. And we had to get an actionable degree at the end of the day. And there was one other stipulation. It could not be a Jesuit school because the Jesuits were too liberal. So if I lived across the street, Loyola would have been off the list, and Fordham was off the list. So that left Manhattan, where Peter went, and Iona College. So I'm one of 7 kids. 6 of us went to Iona, and 1 went to Manhattan. And this is my brother Al, who's the second from the right. He's the oldest, but I'll start with my brother Tom, who's the youngest of the older 3. He's 1 year younger than me, so I got the height genes. But he was an electrical engineer at Manhattan College, went to work for Westinghouse upon graduation, is now with Cadence, and he works on mixed signal design and microprocessors, and has a couple of patents to his name, and just an exceedingly bright individual. I started out, as I said, with an accounting degree out of Iona College Business School, went to work for Price Waterhouse before the C, got my CPA, and while it's lapsed, it has served me exceedingly well throughout the course of my career, and I've served as audit committee chair on several different fund boards, and I've been designated as an audit committee financial expert, mostly due to the entirety of my career, but having that CPA was a big part of it as well. And then my brother Al, the guy in the blue T-shirt, he started out in computer science at PepsiCo, eventually became the #2 guy at American Express, and he's currently the CEO of Visa. So he's had quite a remarkable career as well. And this is all a product of non-Jesuit Catholic education coming out of the bowels of Westchester County. So I think that some of my dad's philosophy was a little bit warped around religion, perhaps. But when it comes to having an actionable degree, I think he had great foresight. And I think those simple lessons never, ever go out of favor. And here's our credential. And somebody once said to me, if you can't sum it up on one 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, you haven't tried hard enough. And my credential is smaller and newer than Peter's, so it's a lot easier for me to put on one page. We did our first outdoor ad campaign in the London Tube. We had done no advertising, no PR before I joined CHI about 3 years ago. And we played off the mind the gap phraseology in London. And this played very well for us. So the traditional asset classes are on the left cliff, stocks, bonds, and cash. And what our curriculum attempts to do is bridge that gap with the alternative asset classes, which here are described as hedge funds, real assets, private equity, commodities, and derivatives. And derivatives is really structured products. It wouldn't fit on the ad. But actually, when we ran this in the London Underground, we had to change it. This is the original ad. They were concerned about the promotion of suicide risk with the fellow leaning over the cliff. So we had to tone that part of it down. But this got great play for us, and I think from a pictorial standpoint, really underscores what we stand for and what the curriculum is all about. So as I said earlier, we're just 15 years old this year. We've got 9,000 members from 90 different countries. We've got some concentration in the U.S. and North America, in this part of the world. I'm sorry, U.S. and Canada in this part of the world. We've got London and Switzerland, our primary bases in EMEA, and then Hong Kong and Singapore, our largest member bases and candidate bases in Asia. But we're opening an office in Mumbai and then hopefully China sometime next year. And like the CFA, the flow through from Asia, particularly India and China, is still quite small, but I think we're going to get more and more uptake as we look to that area going forward. So I think that any credential that you look at is not a silver bullet. It is a ticket onto a very fast train, and you've got to keep learning and you've got to keep growing. And people come to me often, either early in their career or later in their career, and say, if I get the CAIA, is it going to get me a better job or make me more money or get a promotion? And my short answer is, if that's what you're going for, the answer is no. You've got to look at your curriculum, or your CV, I should say, as a body of knowledge over a long, long period of time. Where you work, what type of job you had, how many jobs you had, career progression, and credentials all factor into it. And they're all very, very important pieces to that puzzle. But I think that what I would encourage all of you, if you take nothing away from this, so you don't take the CFA, you don't take the CAIA, sign on to be a lifelong learner. The day you graduate, it's not over. You've got to continue to learn, continue to read, continue to repot yourself. And you're always going to have these gaps, and you've got to find a way of personally and professionally bridging them. So with that, I wish you the best of luck, and I'll turn the table over to Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Peter, I read the book, Thank You for Being Late, and I thought it was a great book. I've read all of Tom Friedman's books, but I do not say that to my students when I start a class. And as far as the EY in London. I know my work with the United Nations and with IFAC. I've worked with a number of accountants in the UK, and as I understand it, they still have the apprenticeship system there, where you can go to an accounting firm out of high school, and you work and you gain your skills, and over about 6 or 10 years, you get certified. And so that's, or you can take an exam. So that was the tradition in England. But I'm going to talk today about the CPA profession and its future. Just this month, there was a headline in the Wall Street Journal in about a half-a-page article. It said, "Firms hit by lack of accountants." What's going on? They're having trouble finding enough of our graduates. Well, let's take a look at the profession, some of the critical issues facing the profession, the CPA exam, and see what's happening with the pipeline disruption. What's happening that's causing students not to get into the profession. And we'll look at globalization, and we'll also look at the horizon and professionalization and some ideas I have about integrating the profession with education. We have a continually evolving profession. One is our knowledge base is increasing. As I'll mention a little later, we're now integrating throughout our curriculum at DePaul the whole idea of data analytics. The idea that accountants are going to do bookkeeping, it's out the window, no bookkeeping. That they're going to be ticking and footing, they're not going to be doing that. They're going to be doing big data, and it's got to be very technological. The practice standards are changing. I have written a book on international financial reporting standards and the movement to converge U.S. standards with international standards, and I've come to the conclusion it's not going to happen. And I tell my students today, it's not one set of standards you got to know. You got to know at least 4 sets of standards, maybe 5 or 6 sets of standards. The CPA exam, student came back and told me out of 72 questions on the practice part of the exam, 18 involved international financial reporting standards. 2 of the 5 simulations involved international financial reporting standards. So our students have to know multiple accounting standards today. And then the licensing requirements are changing. And I'll get into that a little bit more later on. So we're seeing this rapid changes in our profession. So what is the role of the profession? They shape the evolving licensure requirement. The profession sets the licensing requirement. And while I'm focusing on the CPA today, we also have the certified management accountant. I'm a certified global management accountant. We have a variety of certifications. But certification itself is a state function. We have a licensing board in Illinois, and so does every other state. And I know some CPAs that are licensed in 17 states. I happen to be, originally got my license in Texas, and I'm still a licensed CPA in Texas as well as Illinois. Members speak with one voice to legislators, governor's office, and state regulators. That's an objective that we have. When I was president of the Illinois CPA Society, almost half our budget went to an office in Springfield where we dealt with governmental affairs, and that is a very important factor. The lawyers, at one point when I was president, they put a little, on some bill, they put in a requirement that said that only lawyers could prepare tax returns. Fortunately, we found out about that through our office. The computerized examination has changed accounting very much. It used to be that you took the CPA exam on the first week of May or the first week of November, and you took it at McCormick Place with 5,000 other candidates over a period of 3 days. I took mine in Midland, Texas, over 3 days. And the firms knew that, so if you were up for the CPA exam, after taxes were in April 15th, they said, okay, study for the exam, concentrate on it, and pass it in May, okay? That's what they would do. Then in the fall, they would do the same thing. But today, with a computerized exam, you take it whenever you want, whenever you feel like you're ready. The firms, to a great extent, do not even support that taking of the exam. And I know people that are working, 50, 60, 70 hours a week during the time that they are trying to study for the CPA exam. We encourage our students to take the time before they go to a firm and really work on that CPA exam. So that's changed, I think, drastically how many students can actually get through the CPA exam. And then there's the adoption of the Uniform Accountancy Act, which is trying to make things more uniform across the country. The work environment has changed. The intensity of the work environment is amazing. The feedback that I get from our graduates, that it is enormous. The hours approximate legal and medical professions. They run, 40-hour weeks just do not exist. There's flexibility projects versus full-time. Many accountants today do not have offices. The firms have the hoteling system. Even the president of our Alumni Association, who's a major partner in EY, if he's going to work in the office, he has to make a reservation. And he gets assigned to an office for that particular time that he needs it at that point in time. I have 2 children and a niece and a nephew that do not work from a distance. They do not have an office. One of my daughters has a RV, and she goes around the country. But she is an editor for a weekly television program. But she never goes to the office. She does everything electronically. Her goal is to see every national park in the United States. And so she just works by internet. And then paid by performance, as opposed to getting a salary. These are challenges to our students today. We have the diversity of services. Audits, reviews, agreed upon procedures, those are traditional, but we also have consulting services today. Mergers and acquisitions, due diligence, fraud investigations has become a big area. We now have a specialization at DePaul in our master's program in fraud investigations. E-commerce is very important. So what are the most critical issues facing the profession today? This is a survey from the Illinois CPA Society. Standards overload, 52%. Finding and retaining talent, 51%. Pace of technologies, 37%. Tax regulations, 36%. Audit quality, 30%. These are the things that are challenging the profession today. And you can see in each one of these reasons why the people going into the profession may be having a difficulty with that profession and transition. We have significant changes to the CPA exam as well. There's a focus on higher order cognitive skills, which I think is a very good thing. No longer the ticking and footing and bookkeeping aspect of this, and a greater concentration on practical day-to-day accounting tasks. Someone mentioned the simulations. The exam has many more real-life simulations where you have to bring together information from various sources of your education. Stakeholder education, and the new exam takes effect in April 2017, and I'll show you, so that's next month. If we look at the 4 parts of the examination, the one part is remembering and understanding. As someone was saying, that used to be the old way of doing things. You know, you read a book, you remembered everything there, and you wrote it all down. Certainly that was the way it was when I went on the CPA exam. But now, we're expanding that to where application represents from at least half the exam in most cases. And analysis is about 25% of the exam. And in auditing, they've put in a section called evaluation, evaluating like risk assessment. How do you assess the risk in a particular group of facts and situations? And so remembering and understanding is becoming a far less part. For example, FAR, Financial Analysis and Regulation, only 10 to 20% is remembering and understanding. All the rest is application and analysis. Now, pipeline disruption. This is something we've been looking at in the Illinois CPA Society. We have a record number of accounting majors. Our accounting majors, we have like 3 times as many accounting majors today as we did in the year 2000. There's 78,000 graduates from U.S. accounting programs, but when you look at what they did, 38,000, it's about half, don't even sit for the CPA exam. About 26,000 pass it, and 14,000 do not pass it. So of those that actually take the exam, you've got about 2/3 of them pass the exam, about 1/3 do not. But the question is, you've got a lot that don't take the exam, and why is that? Well, one thing is they may not feel competent for it. Another is they've got to be very organized to do that, because now you have to schedule it out. You have to finish it within 18 months. You have to do a variety of things to pass that exam. It's not that regimented May 1st, November 1st situation anymore. Another reason is that we teach a lot of skills today that people go into, they don't go into accounting. We're teaching data management. We're teaching risk assessment, fraud examination, and a variety of things that the students are finding jobs in areas outside of accounting, because they have these skills that go beyond what the traditional auditing and tax area is. And in terms of diversity, we don't do a very good job on diversity. The African Americans, the total CPAs is about 3%, graduates in Illinois, 4.7% in accounting. Hispanics, we're doing better in graduation, but very few of the Hispanics are actually becoming CPAs. We have global stakeholders. I've mentioned some of this already, but we have the IFAC It's responsible for international education standards. I served on the IFAC Education Committee and wrote the basic, I was one of the authors of the basic education standards that are used throughout most of the world today. The European Union has general requirements for auditors and recognition of auditors' rights. We've got NASBA and the AICPA. Then we got various country areas. This is all based on a study that I did in 2012 with Gert Karaman from the Netherlands that we did for the NASBA AICPA. It had to do with the global acceptance of other credentials from other countries. Right now, for a person from another country to practice in the U.S., they have to go and they have to get that individually, their credentials done. And so what we were trying to do is set up in advance so that if a person, the country, could be equivalent to U.S. standards, and we would have that in advance. And so we did, I think, 26 countries that we compared with the U.S. Standards so that it would make that process faster, that we could actually recognize credentials from other countries. Areas that are really growing, especially outside the United States, are sustainability and integrated reporting standards. These are standards environmental, in corporate governance, in the social responsibility, and pulling all these things together. The first time I heard this was a meeting in South Africa with the chief financial officer of Microsoft, who came in and started talking about integrated reporting. And I was fascinated by that, and since I've been doing research for that for the last 10, 15 years. But there's the Global Reporting Initiative, and this is a group of about 250 companies from around the world that have got together. They put together standards for sustainability reporting, and they have these standards. Then you've got the International Integrated Reporting Committee, and they have their set of standards, and there's about 250 companies in that group. And, you know, I go to the IFAC meeting, and it's all the IIRC there. You go to the United Nations accounting meetings, and it's all GRI. They aren't, you know, what standard do you have? It's not like GAAP or IFRS. There's no standard body studying it, yet companies are trying to meet standards in those particular areas. And the United Nations Consultative Group is the group that I have worked with to try to get these organizations to work together. But you can see the challenges that professional accountants have today and that we have with our students. So what's on the horizon? Well, technology is driving change, as our other panel members have said. Big data is very big, and data analytics using artificial intelligence is very big. And auditors, if you think of auditing an international company, you're looking at thousands of transactions in multiple countries and trying to analyze those to see patterns that you might ask questions about. You've got demand for business insight. Our businesses today, as were mentioned earlier, are very complex, and they're very different than what they were and what we experience, like I experienced. And there's the evolution of CPA services beyond these areas. So it's an unprecedented area of change, as the other panelists have said. So what do our graduates face? Globalization, multiple financial reporting standards, broader reporting standards, broader assurance responsibilities. Finally, we must continue to professionalize our programs, and that's the theme of this conference today. We've got to involve faculty in the challenges facing the profession. Get them involved in those areas that I talked about. We've got to support collaborative professional research, so that we have research in which our faculty are working with professionals to understand these problems and come up with solutions. We have to identify high-quality adjunct faculty who teach in their specialty. Now, at DePaul, we have about 100 faculty in accounting. 60 of those are adjuncts, and we have a requirement. If you're an adjunct professor, you have to be doing what you are teaching. And not only that, you have to serve on our curriculum committees so that you can provide input as to what we're doing in our curriculum. And I think this has gone a long way to professionalize our group. So we engage those in adjunct faculty with full-time faculty. So I think we're ready for questions, and I appreciate the time that I've been allocated.
Thank you. Well, gentlemen, turn on your microphones. We're open for questions from the audience, and trying to, it would be, whatever questions that you have obviously would be appreciated, but if you try to focus it on some of the big thematic questions that I posed originally, and one is that should business education be delivered with an intention of practice in mind? And it is very clear that from the discussion that we have had today, we still have some miles to go in that respect. What are we going to do with our faculty? Since I'm a faculty member, I can say that. I asked my colleagues to say that. They say we're scared to say it. So I say it. What are we going to do with our faculty, particularly in business schools? You heard about the realities and complexities of the profession. Well, we have things to learn. And so that's the other component of this conversation here. So I open it, and please, there's a microphone in the middle of the room, and we welcome your questions.
Thought I did, no.
There's a little button in there that, okay, I think Jenny can help you.
Good, thank you.
Yes, it's working.
So could I ask Dr. Needles to put up his last slide, please? Could you, yes, could you put up your last?
I'm going to do it for you.
So I went to one
And
of
the last
Dr.
slide
Needles'
is questions, please.
Yeah,
Is that what you want?
very last slide.
I think you mean this one, right?
That one, you could leave it there too. But
Okay.
his last slide is, what questions do you have? Or yes, that has worked very well for me. I learned that from a conference I went to probably 20 years ago from one of your conferences, so thank you. So then go back one, please, Abel.
Sure. I think I'm going to start asking for some pay, just donation to the school business
That's all right.
probably.
Professor Stevens will compensate you
Okay.
adequately. So I listened to this, and I'm hearing this concept of rate of change over and over again. What does that really mean? Have we really asked ourselves academically what that means? And so here's what I heard, and I'm asking for constructive criticism for my thought. We're academics, and that's fine. I'm an accounting professor here at school. It's Thomas Friedman, World is Flat. He's got this new book out. I'm only a quarter of the way through it. And one of his arguments is, what does it mean to get the younger people to be more efficient faster? And that's one of his primary arguments in the book, at least in the early chapters. Musk is certainly out there pushing the envelope with creative thought. And our young people are under greater demands for contribution earlier in their career. Professor Needles and others have talked about data analytics. So I'm hearing these things, and I'm sitting here, I'm in the trenches. What am I going to do about this? And so here's my thought for constructive criticism. Builds from the case-based logic, law school and medical school, to Professor Jelivin's argument. So my thinking here for constructive criticism is we need cases, not throughout the curriculum, but strategically located. The AACSB would like this for assessment. We need cases where we truncate 30 years of learning and experience so a first-year person can do the audit, can do the financial analysis, and have the same insight that a person would normally require 30 years of work. I don't know exactly what that looks like, because this would be a case, finance, accounting, marketing, wherever it may be, or a combination, or uniquely written, that drives this use of data to be smarter, faster, and I think that's what they're talking about, the rate of change. So our students can be contributors much faster than they traditionally are. So that's my argument. So if anybody wants to think about a case, write it up, work with myself or some other faculty here, I think there would be some interest in that. That's my opinion. What do you think? Is that part of what the solution is to these issues? So that's my question.
Who wants to go first on that?
Well, I agree with it completely, and as I said earlier, I think it's a three-legged stool. It's the academic institutions, the students, and the industry itself, because if you're going to graduate students that are unhappy with the product, the employers are not going to be able to fill these jobs. And it gets back to the point I mentioned before with Microsoft, that they've got all these great ideas and all these investments, but if they don't have the people to staff them, they're going to have to take a full stop. So I think your points are spot on, and I think if you bring that out to the industry, they should embrace this, because we need more competent and relevant graduates for the fields that are evolving very, very quickly in the outside world.
Well, I would say that realistic cases that are pedagogically sound are very important to the curriculum. And what has been a real challenge for me as a traditional faculty member is giving up on content and focusing on application and cases. And it is a challenge. One of the things that I do is that I set, from day one, I have teams in the class, in that we devote time in class to trying to solve cases that are given to the students. But in order to do that, Tom, you have to give up content. And students are used to getting information quickly on the internet. If you ask them a question about some accounting standard or how IFRS compares to US GAAP in this regard, they'll find the answer in just a few minutes, because they know how to search that internet to get those answers. And that's a very different kind of learning than what we traditionally do. And so that's a challenge that we have. But I think that gets to that tools. We also see in the profession that teamwork is very important. I have a graduate student who lives right over here in the Hancock building, and he works on a team, and there are 10 members, but not a single one of them lives in the same city. It's all a national team and probably international as well. And so they have to be able to work in a team from a distance. And he's very successful because he's able to do that.
Yeah, I agree with the points as well. I mentioned that our approach to writing curriculum and my approach to writing exams, I have 30% professors and 70% practitioners. So if I were you, I think I'd go out to some accounting firms and ask them, what are the most interesting cases you're wrestling with now or you have wrestled with recently? And I think they'd be happy to collaborate with you in developing a case for study. Our level 2 and 3 exams are essentially case studies, questions based on cases. I also would just add to one of your first comments, I want to pick up on something Bill said earlier. Thinking about this more, one of the things that's different about old guys like myself's career and what young people face now, the pace of change, I think, is undeniably much more rapid. When I think about, doing things that when I started out, I did it for 3 years, 5 years. Now I don't think people can afford to be that way. And to Bill's point, you have to be adaptable and you have to be committed to continuous learning because every 2-3 years it's going to be different than what you were doing before.
I think just want to build up with Professor Zeller's comments is about the importance of cases. But in order to do so, we also have to change the culture. We have to create incentive for the faculty to write cases. At the present time, cases that are written are not necessarily considered as a scholarly contribution. So I think that is something that if we can promote that idea and motivate our faculty to do so, then in some ways it will help in terms of professionalization of what we do. You got a question, sir? Yes.
Thank you. For the past 28 years...
Could you say your name, please? And
My name is Mohammed Tafti. I'm coming from Hofstra University, Long Island, New York. Thanks for your invitation. For the past 28 years, I have been using the same CPA to do my accounting tax returns. And I trust him. I know him pretty well. A couple of years ago, I called about a week before April 15, asking about my tax return, and the receptionist said that, well, we didn't get it back. And I was wondering, what does it mean? And finally, I found out that, my numbers have been shipped to India. So here is my question, probably for Professor Nieders or whoever can answer. What would be the impact of outsourcing as a result of probably technology and software like TurboTax and so on profession of CPA, and what should be the role of universities to adapt to these changes?
Well, I think outsourcing is changing our education. We have to, as I say, we have to get away from teaching just basic things that people do and up the skills level. And I think the CPA exam is doing that because I was recently in Manila at EY there, and I took the elevator up to the floor to see the managing partner, and there were 3 floors that were all being ripped out and rearranged and everything, and I said, what's going on here? And he says, we're just preparing to do tax returns and audits in the United States. In other words, they're outsourcing doing the tax returns, they're outsourcing doing the basic audit working papers and so forth. That's not going to be done in the United States. It's going to be done in Manila. And, they speak English there, and they've got the good universities. And that was, so our students, if we just train them to do those things, they're not going to have a job. What they need to do is when they go out they've got to be able to do at an upper level, as someone was saying, you know, they've got to give up like 18 years of experience on that first day. And that is, but that's what makes them employable, and that's what will make them a success, is be able to move up and take advantage of that technology and that outsourcing and know what's there, but they're not going to be doing it themselves.
Anybody else who want to take a crack at it? Kevin?
I have two quick comments, a commercial and a question for the panel. One comment is that when it comes to the CPA profession, when you think of the skills required, it's not clear to me that the U.S. capital markets value the audit as much as they could, because the amount of confidence you need to have is extraordinarily high, and the consequences of an audit failure are extraordinarily high. So I'm wondering what are the ways to attract people into the auditing profession and keep them? Because as you know, the model is a churn and burn, and that to me is a problem. The other comment I would make, or more a commercial, is that at this Jesuit university, and unlike where I came from before at DePaul, we have a great certificate program in business data analytics. So Bell, send your accounting kids here, because we will give them a 5-course certificate in business data analytics, and they will rock. I couldn't resist the commercial.
Good.
But for the panel, you look at some of the audit failures we've had, and when you look at the Great Recession, and you look at the expertise we have in the financial profession, what could we do as educators to help mitigate, to help prevent that happening again? So something was lacking. Maybe it was the memorization that we all grew up under, but something was lacking where you see audit failures where you think, in hindsight, everything looks easy. And when you see Kramer the day before the big crash, you know, banging gongs and all that on his show, what can we do as educators so that people get the bigger picture? Because we missed an evaporation of wealth of trillions of dollars. So something we did on our end did not work when it comes to audit failures and when it comes to the meltdown in the financial markets. So I'm wondering what we could be doing different in education.
Well, I can start. Thanks for the question, Kevin. Yeah, I look at our program. We have adopted the CFA ethics and business practices cover to cover, and we felt there should be only one way of looking at ethics and ethical behavior in financial services, and they had written the book, and we adopted it. But yeah, I think that, I don't know if you can rinse the bad actors out of this environment completely, which I think is a sad reality. I think the adage of locks keeping honest people honest, I think the ethical component to these programs is enormously important. But I think that people get put in pressure situations and pressure markets, moving around massive amounts of money. I think that you get a good person put in a very tough situation, and everything they heard and read goes out the window for that nanosecond, and I think a lot of these people just make stupid decisions in a second. There are people that I think, you look at a Madoff, I think there you had more of a sociopath, career criminal, if you will, and there's just no place for those types of people in the industry as well. So I don't know if we can have an academic solution for that. I think that we as credentialing bodies focus on this an enormous amount of time, and we spend a lot of time looking at our member behavior, and if there's complaints, we react to them in a very serious way, but I think unfortunately humans being who they are, and this being an industry that pays quite well, I think you can attract people for the monetary reward, and sometimes they're going to make foolish decisions.
Yeah, I agree with Bill. I'd add a couple of things. I think one thing you can do is to build on the ethical training is talk about conflicts of interest and what they are and how they come about and how to deal with them. One good example of that is you look at the rating agencies. I think the way they behaved was basically criminal act, in my opinion. They had huge conflicts of interest with investment bankers, and they were rating the securities the way were asked to rate them and they got paid for it. Somebody should have been blowing the whistle on that. I guess, I forgot my other point. Maybe someone else will talk and I'll remember it.
Please.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm Mike Vassalo. I'm teaching here at Loyola. Bell, you mentioned something about giving up content is the challenge to bringing cases into the classroom. I don't think we have to give up content. I think we have to move content, and move content through technology so that we're not lecturing in the classroom. We're lecturing on YouTube, for example. I got that idea from Susan Crossan, one of your co-authors. And then giving the classroom back to the students and using that evening that we have with them, doing something with them, going over cases or problem sets or whatever, but giving that to them and taking our theatrical skills to other media and still getting the content delivered.
Yeah, I think you're right that you have to shift the content elsewhere, and they have to do more work outside the classroom, and they can't depend just on the classroom. But it has forced me to say, now what is really important about this subject that I'm teaching? And what is something that could be learned later, or they could reference if they run into a situation where that exists. So you try to get them to think about the subject and move to those higher level skills that are talked about on the CPA exam. But I do agree that videos and that sort of thing, you can do more outside the class. But of course, that puts more constraints on more constraints on what they're doing too.
Right, more homework in a sense.
Yeah, more homework.
Can I add my forgotten point?
Yes.
I think another area that would be really helpful is to imbue in students the hard work on data analysis, and several of us have commented, machines may do a lot of that for us in the future, but there was a guy in Boston who was trying to blow the whistle on Madoff for years, and the SEC didn't listen. He looked at Madoff's performance data and said it was impossible. There's no combination of investments this guy could have made that would yield those returns. So I think that's very important. The other thing is, if you look at a big part of the financial crisis, I think, was refusal to believe that things were going bad. This time is different. We're going to be able to go in worse areas of credit than we ever did before in the history of the world, because we just know there's never been a 5-year decline in real estate, so it can't happen. There was a strong will to believe that the success was going to continue forever. And the data showed that the credit risk, if you looked at people's mortgage liabilities to income, was way, way above where it ever had been before. But nobody paid attention. They didn't want to listen to that.
We talked about artificial intelligence for one moment. I was at KPMG in New York, and they're using Watson, and they're feeding every real estate contract they've ever written, and Watson is reading the real estate contracts, and they won't need lawyers to read them, because they'll be able to say, run them through the algorithm, and this is a contract that's going to work, and this is a contract that's not going to work. Millions and millions of real estate contracts that are read like that. Just such a different world.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's terrifying or refreshing. Sorry.
Dr. Maliuris.
Yes. I sensed as the discussion was taking place, and as Abel kept saying, what should we do with our professors? And since I'm one of these professors, I start thinking, what is the difference between professional business education and professor? And I believe the root is exactly the same. What is it that you profess you do, and what it is that I, as a professor, profess to do. When I go to class, I value the opportunity that I have with every student for a quarter or a semester. This is a semester that I will not have them again, and they will not have the opportunity to be with me. And I want to distill in their hearts and souls what it is that I believe finance is. I teach a course in derivatives, and I go to that class and I say, 45 years of teaching, having written a textbook that you guys use for CFA, this is what you ought to know. This is what I believe you need. And I expect you, when they come and join JP Morgan to do derivatives, to say, now that Quinlan taught you derivatives, let's take a very small microcosm and tell you what it is we do with them. A statement was made that businesses expect the student to start day one producing. If a corporation is under such an incredible pressure that it cannot teach its people how to do their business, it's equivalent to saying, I'm taking a student from a medical school who has graduated and let him or her move to do an open heart surgery. It takes patience, it takes time, and if business understands what universities do, there's no reason for us to duplicate what it is that you do. We give the big picture, we give the foundations, all your exams are on textbooks. Actually, several of our professors were very upset when they deleted our own books from your own and you produce your background, correct? So how could we collaborate rather than try to replace one another?
Very good question, and if I just want to extend a little bit, because Tassos's background is in economics and finance, so I believe in the rules of competition and elimination. So, given the fact that there are certain things that we do that you guys don't do, and there are certain things that just that you do that we want to learn. So, the ultimate success in any one of these organizations means the elimination of the other one. So what are your comments about that? If we just basically do everything that the CFA does, and we can, and you can actually do everything that we do to a great extent, because through MOOCs and any other thing, then the question of collaboration becomes like a very important issue, because we could also set an objective to say that we're just going to eliminate you, or you're going to eliminate us. Any comments?
As I said, I have always seen the value of collaboration, and we have relationships with 450 universities around the world now, and we find it extremely valuable, and we hope it's valuable to the universities as well. At some level, we're competitive with Kaya as well. If someone is looking to make a decision about whether to go for an MBA or CFA or Kaya, there are going to be people who make those decisions, one or the other, and that's the last designation they get. But a lot of people don't look at it that way. They look at life as a continuous journey, and many of our CFA charter holders have MBAs and other designations like Kaya. I don't know. I agree with the way you presented what your role should be in a classroom, very much so. And I think a lot of the points I tried to make emphasize the things that you can do that we can't. We're distance learning, self-study. So we can't organize people into groups and teams and projects. We can't talk to them with passion about the things that you've learned in your career. those are all huge advantages that you have.
I would just add to Peter's remarks.
I didn't, of course, mean what I said. I just wanted to
No, but I think it's
create a
it's
sort of an
it's
emotional discussion here.
It's an interesting, provocative thought, and I think ultimately, and I speak for Kaya, but I think I speak for all of us up here, it's not about the exam. It's about the exam until you get through the exam, and then it's about the professional body and what it stands for, and the network, and what a Kaya stands for, what a CFA stands for, or AICPA. And it's not about the exam and not about the textbook. And I learned this early on, that I was in China in my first couple of months having joined Kaya, and we were talking to a prep provider. And on the middle of his conference room table was our curriculum textbook. And I noticed in the binder of the book it had Chinese characters. Our exam is only given in English. Our textbook is only in English. It's the same for the CFA. So the CEO of this entity sitting across from me with his translator, and the translator is telling me that that book is available on the street for $9. And he's waiting for a reaction from me. And I look him right in the eye and say, I don't care. I'm not in the book business. Wiley, who produces that book, might be upset, but if somebody has gone to the trouble of replicating my textbook and has distributed it all over China, from a learning standpoint, that is excellent for me because I'm not in the book business. I'm in the professional credentialing business, body of knowledge business. I want to have a bigger body of members in China, and I think that brings professionalism to the industry. But I get back to one of the points I made earlier. If somebody comes to me and says, if I take Kaya, is it going to lead me to a better job tomorrow? I would say don't bother taking it, you're going to be disappointed. And there are a lot of publications, and fortunately they pick on the CFA more than me, they make these comparisons of the cost of an MBA versus the cost of CFA and what it means long term, and really make it into a monetizing exercise. And I just think that that's the wrong approach. So I think that any academic institution could render any one of us moot around taking the learning and bringing it into the classroom. I think it's the body of knowledge and professionalism and the level of tenure of these professionals in this industry that makes a big, big difference. And that you can't replicate in the classroom.
Thank you. Al, do you have any comments on?
No, I think I agree with those comments.
Any other question, please?
I just addressed the quote I used saying that employers want people to be ready on day one. Probably a bit more dramatic than reality. I think most employers probably still do expect to do some training, but I do think it's true they want people to come in a bit more well-rounded than in my day when I showed up not knowing anything about anything. I think they do expect you to know how to work on teams and things like that. So, but granted, it's a bit of an exaggeration.
All right. Hi, my name is Deborah Hill, and I don't teach at Loyola. I have a question for you because as I hear you talk about the importance of practicums and talking about case studies and real-world applications, and also the parallels between medicine and law, I wonder, when I look at law, I see that law students are involved with real-world cases, and I see that medical students are involved in clinics, starting to apply their skills. Why not in a business school adopt a company? We're in Chicago, it's a huge startup environment. There are tons of companies out there that would probably love to have a class adopt them because they're a small company, they don't have a CPA that works for them, and work with them for a term to figure out how should they keep their books, how should they do their taxes, all the kinds of things that you've been talking about. And wouldn't that be a great experience for students? Because working with a real company is much more dynamic than working with a case study. Case studies are very sterile. They have sort of predetermined outcomes. But when you're working with a real company, things happen in the business that change and are much more dynamic. And I wonder if you've ever considered doing that and preparing your students using collaborations with real companies.
Thank you.
That one's for you.
Oh, that one's for me. I was going to build on what you said, but I was going to introduce this concept of internship for the faculty. We always talk about internship for the students. One example that I can share with you, personal experience. When I got my tenure many, many years ago, and I will not tell you when, we had a policy in Canada that you would get an automatic sabbatical. I'm not saying that that policy has to be done, but what happened was that When I got my sabbatical, they cut certain part of my salary, which is fine. And then I negotiated with a major telephone company that if they could pay me the difference, then I could basically work for them for 6 months and I could help them in some sort of a strategic decision. Now, the company immediately agreed because for 6 months of getting a tenured professor in finance for that amount of money to the company was nothing. So it is entirely possible that we can establish a partnership with the industry. We look at 20, 30 major companies in Chicago, and we say that every time that a faculty member gets tenure, we're willing to lend this faculty to that company for 6 months on a specific project which is both in line with the faculty's research and the requirement of the company. And the company pays half of the cost of losing that faculty, and the other cost would be, or the company pays the entire cost, because the cost is not as much to the company as it is for the university. In this sense, you will have your tenured faculty that they have proven their skills in doing research. Now they would be having an opportunity to work in a company and learn about how the professional part of the education is done. So that's another possibility that I'm sure business community will be quite willing to engage in. And it requires, just approaching them and proposing them.
To address your question somewhat too, many of our students do have experiential learning. Many of our students do have internships. We are not as far along as the German model, the University of Hamburg, where students spend half the time working in the industry, half the time in the classroom. It's a challenge to get meaningful internships, but the accounting faculty speak to this more than I can. The vast majority of accounting students do get internships. One of the things that we like to do here at Loyola is get our kids into social enterprises, the middle ground between the non-for-profit and for-profit. So we have lots and lots of students out there who are working with social enterprises on real problems. It's an interesting continuum, and how do you make it work in that kind of curriculum? It's certainly the way, Bella, this is your comments. It certainly is the way of the future to get our students more in the work environment, far more than we ever were when we went to school.
Yes, accounting students today, a vast majority do take internships. And there are many firms today that will not interview a student unless they've had an internship. There used to be a program, and I don't know if it still exists, but it was an adopt a business type program in business schools. A school that I was at had a program like that, and I thought it was part of some national idea. And I mean, we have an entrepreneurial center, and I think they're involved in that sort of thing. I'm not involved in it personally, but I think there are programs like that.
I'll just mention I think buying companies, owning companies is a bit more complicated than this example I'm going to give, but there are many universities who have student-run portfolios, investment portfolios. Usually requires a wealthy donor to earmark money for that purpose or carve out of a small piece of the endowment, but those opportunities are extremely good learning opportunities for the students. And they actually have to, you usually have a mentor or mentors, and they have to perform rigorous analysis and argue about their recommendations with each other before they buy or sell something. So those are all good real-life experiences, I think.
Well, we can entertain one more question because we're getting toward the end of the program. Yes, did you? Oh, didn't see any. Very well. Thank you very much for attending this event at Quinlan School of Business, and definitely the finance group. We're looking forward to strengthening our relationship with CFA and Kaya, and providing our students with the professional component of decision-making in finance and accounting. You have been a great audience. Thank you for participating, and good night.